Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett. On the Navaz is away. On the NewsHour tonight, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump both court Latino voters 2 weeks ahead of Election Day. Lebanese first responders trying to rescue those wounded by Israeli airstrikes increasingly find themselves in the line of fire. And we take a look at state ballot measures that could have ripple effects nationwide, including by boosting turnout in this year's presidential election.
In this election, in which Vice President Harris and former President Trump are running so close, hey, 5, 10, 15,000 votes, that could be the difference between a President Harris or a second Trump term.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
moving our economy for 160 years. BNSF, the engine that connects us.
the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Kathy and Paul Anderson, and Camilla and George Smith.
The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, fostering informed and engaged communities. More at kf.org.
And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. 2 weeks from today, the final votes will be cast and the polls will close in this year's presidential race. Until then, the Trump and Harris campaigns are making their cases in battleground states across the country. Laura Barone Lopez has this report.
Both presidential nominees made appeals to a critical voting bloc today, Latino voters.
The level of genius, entrepreneurship, energy that they have, it's an incredible community, and I liked them and they liked me.
Former President Donald Trump received a warm response from Latino business owners and religious leaders at his golf club in Miami. Trump again used dark language to describe the state of the country.
We are a nation in decline. We're a failing nation. We're laughed at all over the world. No matter where you go, they laugh at us. They can't even believe what's happening.
And spent time sowing fear around transgender Americans.
All they think about is transgender operations. All they think about is we want men to play in women's sports. There's a sickness going on in our country. We have to end the sickness.
It sounds insane.
In the final sprint to Election Day, Republicans have poured millions of dollars into anti-trans attack ads that target Democrats up and down the ballot.
Kamala's agenda is they, them, not you.
The former president also repeated attacks on his opponent's intelligence, criticizing Vice President Harris for not doing any public events today.
She's lazy as hell, and she's got that reputation. And there's something wrong with her, too. She's slow, low IQ, something. I don't know what the hell it is.
Vice President Harris had staff meetings and briefings in D.C. before giving interviews to Telemundo and NBC.
We are sitting here 2 weeks away from Election night. Last election, the former president came out on Election night and declared victory before all the votes were counted. What is your plan if he does that again in 2 weeks?
Well, let me say this. We've got 2 weeks to go, and I'm very much grounded in the present in terms of the task at hand, and we will deal with election night and the days after as they come, and we have the resources and the expertise and the focus on that as well.
So you have teams ready to go? Is that what you're saying? Are you thinking about that as a possibility?
Of course.
Today in Wisconsin, former President Barack Obama joined Harris's running mate, Governor Tim Walz, as the state kicked off early in-person voting.
Our team is running like everything is on the line, because everything is on the line.
Donald Trump wants us to think that this country is hopelessly divided between us and them. Now, for him, us means the, quote, real Americans who support him. Anybody who doesn't, they're them. And he employs this strategy like politicians have for millennia, because having people divided and angry boosts his chances of being elected.
Republican vice presidential nominee Senator J.D. Vance campaigned in Arizona.
We got to make sure that if this election is as tight as it could be, that we're the ones who are on the winning side and not them, and the only way to do it is to work our rear ends off for the next 2 weeks.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Laura Barone Lopez.
The day's other headlines start in the Middle East. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on his 11th trip to Israel since the war with Hamas began. He arrived this morning in a bid to revive ceasefire talks following Israel's killing of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar last week. Blinken met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other officials throughout the day. He urged Israel to use Sinwar's killing to its advantage at the negotiating table.
I believe very much that the death of Sinwar does create an important opportunity to bring the hostages home, to bring the war to an end, and to ensure Israel's security. This is, and we have to make sure that this is, a moment of opportunity to move forward.
Blinken also urged Israel's leaders to allow more humanitarian aid into northern Gaza amid a renewed Israeli offensive there. The U.S. warned last week that it could cut Israel's access to weapons funding if it doesn't let more supplies in. The State Department said today that more aid trucks have entered since then, but more needs to be done. The FBI said today that it's investigating an unauthorized release of classified U.S. documents. They relate to Israel's plans for a possible retaliatory strike on Iran for its ballistic missile attack on Israel earlier this month. Marked top secret, the documents first appeared last week on the Telegram messaging app and spread to channels that are popular among Iranians. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby said it's unclear if the documents were leaked or obtained through hacking, but officials do not expect more to be released. Russian President Vladimir Putin welcomed world leaders to a summit of the BRICS bloc of developing economies that initially included Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but the alliance has since expanded to embrace Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and others. Among the more than 20 world leaders in attendance are a number of U.S. adversaries, including the president of Iran and China's Xi Jinping. But there are also U.S. allies, including India's Narendra Modi. The summit will last for 3 days and is seen as a chance for Putin to counter the Western narrative that Russia has been isolated on the world stage following its invasion of Ukraine. Cuba is working to get the lights back on following Friday's massive power outage, even as parts of the island deal with deadly flooding caused by Hurricane Oscar. Many of the 2 million people living in the capital, Havana, have been living in darkness for days, with some using wooden stoves to cook food before it goes bad. Power was partially restored in the city last night, but anger and frustration persist, with protesters taking to the streets for a second night.
We have been without power for 4 days. The food has spoiled. The children are struggling. We have no cold water. We have nothing.
Meantime, communities in the east of the country are facing massive flooding left behind by Hurricane Oscar, which has killed at least 6 people since making landfall on Sunday. Cuba's president said on state TV that some areas are still hard to reach and that search and rescue efforts are ongoing. Officials in North Carolina say they overcounted the number of official deaths from Hurricane Helene. Officials in Buncombe County, which includes the city of Asheville, now say there were 42 deaths there as a result of the September storm. That's down from the initial report of 72 lives being lost and aligns with the state's overall counting of fatalities. Authorities say the reasons for the change include updated causes of death and communication challenges after the storm knocked out cell phone service to some areas. Federal health officials say that an E. coli outbreak linked to McDonald's Quarter Pounders has sickened at least 49 people in 10 states. One person has died and 10 others have been hospitalized, including a child. The CDC says the infections were reported between September 27th and October 11th. They occurred in Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Oregon, Utah, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. Federal and state health officials are investigating the outbreak. Federal agents arrested the former CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch on charges that he ran a sex trafficking and prostitution operation from 2008 to 2015. The indictment alleges Mike Jeffries lured young men with promises of modeling work and coerced them into sex acts. 2 alleged co-conspirators, including his romantic partner, were also arrested. Jeffries helped revitalize the struggling retailer during his 2-decade tenure, during which it became known for its sexualized marketing. He stepped down in 2014. Prosecutors said today's charges are proof that powerful people in the industry can no longer take advantage of those most vulnerable.
To anyone who thinks they can exploit and coerce others by using the so-called casting couch system, this case should serve as a warning. Prepare to trade that couch for a bed in federal prison.
The arrests come after similar allegations were first reported in a BBC investigation last year. A lawyer for Jeffries says he will respond to the charges in court. On Wall Street today, stocks ended little changed. The Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped just 6 points, so basically unchanged. The Nasdaq managed a slight gain, adding just over 30 points. The S&P 500 was also virtually flat on the day. And Thelma Mothershed Ware has died. She was one of a group of black students known as the Little Rock Nine, who integrated an Arkansas high school in 1957. The U.S. Supreme Court had declared segregated classrooms unconstitutional 3 years earlier, but the governor of Arkansas had ordered the National Guard to block the students from enrolling at Little Rock's Central High School. Mothershed Ware and her 8 classmates had to be escorted in by federal troops. In 1999, they were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal by then-President Bill Clinton. Thelma Mothershed Ware died this past weekend in Little Rock. She was 83 years old. Still to come on the NewsHour, we report from New York State on the races that could decide control of Congress. The federal government works to make it easier for people to unsubscribe. And author Richard Esposito discusses his new book on legendary crime reporter Jimmy Breslin.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Toss-up races in 2 of the country's bluest states could swing control of the House of Representatives next year. Political correspondent Lisa Desjardins explores the unusual dynamics playing out in one of those states, New York.
The temperatures are dropping in New York's Hudson Valley. It is campaign season. And in a parking lot in East Fishkill, a group of Republicans finish their coffee and get ready to fan out.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today.
Bonnie McCool-Weigard with the local GOP is organizing this door-to-door effort centered on a bright red area in a deep blue county.
Throughout the state, New York Republicans and conservatives are fighting very hard.
How Republicans do here and in other Democratic strongholds will likely determine who controls the House of Representatives. For Democrats to retake the chamber, they need to gain just 4 seats nationally. And in the 2 biggest blue states, California and New York, there are 9 highly competitive House races where Democrats could flip a Republican seat. That includes this district in the Hudson Valley. Freshman Congressman and Republican Mike Lawler faces a former Congressman, Democrat Mondaire Jones. Lawler is known as a hard worker. He needs to be. This district voted for Joe Biden by 10 points. The area has a history of bipartisanship, but as we heard ourselves, things have become more acute.
I think this is the most important election of our lifetime. I know every election is important, but I think this year it's not even Republicans versus Democrats. I think it's good versus evil.
You think the Democrats are evil?
Not the Democrats, but a lot of philosophies I do not agree with.
Hello, sir. How are
How's
you?
it going?
The district is highly educated and, key for Republicans, home to a large population of former and current law enforcement. That sharpens the larger debate over criminal justice and crime here, a key attack point for Republicans against Jones.
Of course, we need to end mass incarceration and defund the police.
Jones said that once in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd, but has since reversed it, as he told us in an online interview.
To be very clear, those words were very stupid. They were used at a very emotional time, not just for me as a black man, but for the nation. And I think history has recorded my strong support of law enforcement from my time in Congress, which is what matters.
Republicans in Congress have crippled abortion rights.
As the sheer storm of campaign ads shows,
Biden and Mondaire Jones spent money faster than they could print it.
all the national issues are swirling here. The economy, abortion, immigration, Israel, and parental and LGBTQ rights.
What legislation did you ever lead on?
But overall, negatives dominate, as seen in a recent debate.
My opponent is part of a Congress that is defined by chaos.
You're the one who chose to leave this district, pack it up to Brooklyn.
Lawler confronted his past, a photo of him in blackface in college in a Michael Jackson costume.
Would I do this today? Absolutely not. I recognize why people are offended or upset or hurt. In no way was I ever dressing up to demean or belittle or make fun of black Americans.
It's a neck-and-neck race, you know?
Bruce Canini is a Republican and former sheriff's deputy who points to a larger partisan tension, the presidential race. He'll probably vote for Lawler, but Bruce is unhappy with both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, thinking of his felonies and of January 6th.
My God, how many trials and, convictions. And then he's going to release all the people that entered the Capitol. That's wrong.
That
Mike Lawler stands with Donald Trump.
Is a key Democratic point of attack at Lawler. At a nearby diner, I asked him about Trump, a candidate his district most likely will reject, but whose policies he backs.
Look, he is who he is. He's 78 years old. He's not changing who he is at this point.
You support him?
I think I do. I will be voting for him. But the choice is between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
When it comes down to it, he's got to support Trump or he won't have his job. And I feel it's dangerous.
Tom Stein is a Democrat we saw putting up signs. He says Mondaire Jones and his race are critical to opposing Trump and the impact that he's personally seen, including on a local level.
What's the atmosphere?
It's an angrier atmosphere, and I think that it comes from Donald Trump's rhetoric.
The area is a collage of dynamics. The longtime population here is aging and new groups are moving in. An influx from New York City, some progressive, some conservative, as well as recent generations of immigrants. That includes a host of Hispanic communities.
So 50.
Giselle Martinez is the first generation in her family to vote. And at 22, she ran for and won a seat on the Newburgh City Council. The city is one of Hudson Valley's urban centers, a Democratic stronghold, where a different Democratic congressman is more clearly out in front. But the issues here are area-wide, including a rise in migrants, some undocumented, some here legally, and now voting citizens.
Estamos buscando a Delfino Martinez.
The battle for growing groups of Latinos is key to the Valley's future and its present. Why Giselle and other Latinas are doing their own door-to-door. And she's noticed something.
We've seen a shift where specifically Latino men tend to lean more conservative and tend to vote more Republican.
To Giselle, Republican policies are harmful and bipartisanship is not the answer. I told her how Republican organizer Bonnie sees this year as a fight between good and evil.
I would agree with her, actually. This is an election between good and evil. And I say that because, unfortunately, there's been very xenophobic and hateful rhetoric that's been thrown out about specific communities, specifically the immigrant community.
The tension here reflects national issues and stakes. But New York is not a swing state, and the Hudson Valley is really more blue than purple. Republicans have made this lush landscape competitive. It's a big test for Democrats in a big year. Can they win in their own territory? That will determine the fate of the House. In Hudson Valley, New York, I'm Lisa Desjardins for the PBS NewsHour.
Voters across the country will decide the fate of 150 ballot measures this fall. The outcomes of those elections could have profound effects on people's everyday lives, from abortion access to criminal justice to the way people vote. One of the states deciding how future elections will work is Montana, and that's where we start with this report from Stan Parker at Montana PBS.
This November, voters in Montana will be deciding on 2 ballot measures that would fundamentally change voting in the state if they pass.
Vote yes in November, and we'll be able to vote person, not just party.
Republican Frank Garner is a former state lawmaker and retired police chief. Now he's helping lead Montanans for Election Reform, the bipartisan group behind the initiatives.
If you wonder why we have polarization, where we have division, where we can't solve hard problems, it has to do with the system we use to hire people for the important job of governing.
If the measures pass, the state would have nonpartisan primaries and a majority winner requirement for future general elections. Not everyone is on board, including fellow Republicans like State Party Chairman Don Kaltschmidt.
We have a great system right now. If it isn't broke, don't fix it.
For more than 100 years, Montana has held separate primary contests for each party. But under one of the proposed amendments, everyone running for office would go on the same primary ballot, and then the top 4 vote winners in each race, no matter their party, would go on to the general election. Implementing a top 4 system likely wouldn't diminish Republican strength in Montana's elections, but reformers say it would incentivize candidates to appeal to all voters, not just traditional primary voters who skew more partisan.
I can't just pay attention as a candidate to just the primary voter or just what happens in the primary. I have to worry about the general election now because of competition too. So I have to govern more broadly. I have to talk to more people.
But what if 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat were running in a deep red district, and the Democrat won just because the conservative vote split 3 ways? That's part of why there's a second initiative that would require a majority winner in the general election.
And we believe that's important because it causes our representatives to have to build coalitions, govern more broadly, and to be able to say that they enjoy the support of a majority of people.
What's left undecided for now, exactly how to implement the change, whether this could result in runoff elections or ranked choice voting, as some other states have done. At the heart of these reforms is an attempt to lessen the role of political parties in elections and allow independent voters to have a greater voice in the process.
You have 40% of Montanans, don't forget, that don't identify with the party. Those people feel completely disaffected by our current voting system.
Critics like Don Kaltschmidt want to see the party system stay.
The Republican Party has their platform. The Democrats have their platform. The Libertarians have their platform. I think all of us need to look at which one do we mostly identify with. And that has been a system that's worked very, very well in our state, and we've had great representation of this.
The state Democratic Party hasn't taken an official stance on the ballot initiatives. Former lawmaker Dave Wanzenried sees them as a misguided attempt to change voter behavior.
Well, I think they're a substitute for the hard work that needs to be done, frankly. It'll be easy for us to vote for that and say, well, took care of that, now on to the next thing, and leave it up to somebody else to actually implement it, not pay attention to the details.
Garner recognizes these reforms will not be a cure-all for what he sees as the problems in politics, but thinks they are a needed first step.
As much good as these will do, they aren't going to solve every problem, right? We still have to have good people run. We still have to work together to find solutions. But right now we have a system that incentivizes the wrong behavior, and we have to change that fundamentally.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stan Parker in Billings, Montana.
For more on how those Montana ballot measures fit into the national landscape, we're joined now by Reed Wilson, founder and editor of Pluribus News. That's a digital media outlet tracking public policy in the states. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So Montana is considering a nonpartisan primary. What else are voters considering this year?
Well, first of all, we're seeing a lot of ballot initiatives that have to do with ranked choice voting. That is, when you walk into a ballot, instead of choosing just one candidate, you can rank your best choices. The thinking on that is that voters will be able to prioritize the candidates who build the broadest coalition, and therefore will have fewer extremists from the right or the left, and more people who work towards consensus and building those big coalitions. We're going to see those ballot measures in Colorado, Washington, D.C., Idaho, Nevada, and Oregon. Interestingly, in Alaska, voters are going to decide whether or not to repeal their existing ranked choice voting. So it's not exactly something that everybody absolutely loves, but this is the highest number of these ballot initiatives on ranked choice voting that we've ever seen on a single ballot.
Yeah. On a separate matter, on the campaign trail, we've heard Donald Trump and Republicans warn against non-citizens voting in the election, which we should say is already forbidden in federal elections. But now several states are considering ballot measures to prohibit what is already illegal?
So not necessarily. So there are ballot initiatives on the ballot in 8 states controlled by Republican state legislatures who effectively want people to be thinking about illegal immigration when they walk into the polling place. So federal voting by non-citizens is already illegal, but these states would make state and local elections off limits to non-citizens as well. There are a very small number of places in California, Vermont, Maryland that allow non-citizens to vote on things like school board races or city council races. These would preempt all of those in those particular states. But then again, as you point out, in those states, there are no cities that allow non-citizens to vote.
Another major issue in this election is reproductive rights, and this year continues a trend we've seen since the fall of Roe, where states are voting on abortion access. What are you watching for?
So there are 10 states across the country where abortion rights are on the ballot, and they range from pretty red states like Missouri and Nebraska to swing presidential states like Arizona and Nevada, and maybe even Florida is on that swing list. In every election since Roe v. Wade fell, when an abortion rights measure has been on the ballot, the pro-abortion rights position has passed, not just in blue states like California and Vermont, but in formerly swing states like Ohio, and even in very conservative states like Kentucky and Kansas. So I expect most of these abortion measures to pass. The one big wrinkle comes in Florida, where state law requires a constitutional amendment to get 60% of the vote. All the polls are showing that amendment right at 60, maybe just under. It's a really high hurdle, but the pro-abortion rights side has raised more than $90 million to advance their cause there. That's about 9 times what opponents have raised. So they've got the money. Let's see if they can find the votes.
Yeah. And Democrats are hoping that having abortion rights on the ballot will boost turnout in some of these states. Is that expectation justified based on your reporting?
So yes and no. There are very few examples in which a ballot initiative brings enough people to the polls in a presidential election, which is already going to be a high turnout election, to swing it to make a difference. The one real time when academics got to study this was back in 2004, when so many anti-same-sex marriage bans were on the ballot. Those measures might have pulled out 10,000, 15,000 votes in some of the real swing states. Remember, George W. Bush beat John Kerry in Ohio by just a few tens of thousands of votes. Now, in this election, in which Vice President Harris and former President Trump are running so close, hey, 5, 10, 15,000 votes, that could be the difference between a President Harris or a second Trump term.
Reed Wilson of Pluribus News. Great to have you here.
Thanks so much.
The Israeli military today said it killed the man set to succeed Hezbollah's longtime leader, who was also assassinated by Israel in late September. The IDF confirmed Hashem Safiuddin was killed along with other top leaders of the militant group in an early October Beirut airstrike. Meantime, Hezbollah fired at least 80 rockets on northern Israel today. Some were intercepted, others left Israelis wounded. As the war between Israel and Hezbollah expands, its toll on civilians in Lebanon is only worsening. As Layla Molana Allen reports, Israeli airstrikes around Beirut have increasingly targeted healthcare facilities and healthcare workers.
An 11-story apartment block leveled in less than a second. Dozens of homes and lives demolished. This missile strike came with a warning, so residents grabbed what they could and fled. Each night, the streets of Beirut fill with panic as residents run from their homes under threat. but often there's no warning at all. And now, hospitals as well as homes are under attack. Yesterday, Israel's authorities said they believed a Hezbollah cash trove sat under Beirut's Al-Sahel hospital, but said they wouldn't strike it. Instead, they hit a different one. Just before midnight, an airstrike was launched at the entrance of Beirut's Rafik Hariri hospital, flattening 4 buildings in front of it. This is the capital's main specialist public hospital, where children injured in the bombing are receiving surgery. Rescuers dug for hours through the mangled carcass of concrete and iron, searching for survivors. By morning, 18 were dead and 60 injured.
I have a brother who's still under the rubble. His mobile phone is ringing. We're trying to search for him, but there is no way for a machine to get here. No one can help us pull him out. I don't know if he's dead or still alive.
It's not the first time healthcare has come under attack in this increasingly brutal war. More than 100 medics have been killed while working in the past month. At least 50 health facilities have been targeted. In spite of the risks, Lebanon's medics and rescue workers, who are all volunteers in donation-funded ambulances, continue to respond to distress calls. Ali and his team are based in Saida, one of the South's main coastal cities, and inside the zone, Israel says it will target. He and his team have worked non-stop for weeks. Hours before we joined Ali's crew, 5 of his friends were killed when the church they were sleeping in while running rescue operations was bombed.
It's heartbreaking what happened yesterday. We've repeatedly appealed to international organizations that targeting ambulances and paramedics is internationally unlawful, but no one has helped.
These volunteers have full-time jobs too, but they put everything on hold to respond to the crisis.
Even if there's danger, we rush to help. Our only goal is to save a life and assist someone in need. Yes, there's risk, but honestly, sometimes we don't even think about the danger when we see an injured child or anyone else in distress.
When Mamdouh and his team responded to a strike on an apartment complex in a town nearby, he couldn't believe what he was seeing.
The scene was terrifying and utterly heartbreaking. There were children, just pieces of children. I'll never forget one child. I was able to recover the head and arm, but the rest of the body was never found. Just small fragments less than an inch in size. We were picking up the pieces. It was a massacre in every sense of the word.
Mamdouh says the sheer scale of the destruction was overwhelming. They worked for 72 hours pulling bodies from the rubble.
We try to hold ourselves together as much as possible, but it's tough. One experience really stayed with me. While we were clearing the rubble and retrieving the dead, we found an older man and a woman wrapped together, trying to protect each other, both dead, both scared, together in their final moments beneath the rubble.
Mamdouh knows what he's risking.
We receive many threats and are constantly exposed to airstrikes. They don't differentiate at all between military personnel, civilians, or paramedics. Anyone trying to do their duty is at risk.
Ghassan Suhaim, who runs the civil defense unit in Beirut's Dahia suburbs, has lost 18 of his volunteers in a month. Hassan was the first to die 4 weeks ago. He wasn't just a colleague, but a friend.
He rescued 2 children who were still alive. The rubble fell on him as the building was collapsing, and he got injured, but he never took time to rest. He insisted on staying. He worked through the whole night. I left him at 8 a.m. At 8:30, they called me from the site telling me he had suffocated.
Hassan died under the rubble, having saved dozens of lives. Ghassan says each member of his team would do the same.
It's normal to be afraid. We wouldn't be human if we weren't. But determination, strength, and believing in this humanitarian work makes us fearless. We won't abandon our people, no matter how intense the bombings and destruction gets.
Attacking medical workers and striking healthcare facilities are war crimes. But as the red lines of international law have blurred in this conflict, so too has accountability from the international community. The UN and NGOs are crying out for tighter restrictions to stall the use of US-supplied weapons on civilian infrastructure. Few here believe Israel's American allies will take action. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Layla Milana Allen in Saida, Lebanon.
A newly proposed rule from the Federal Trade Commission aims to let consumers easily cancel unwanted subscriptions. But many businesses argue the move is unnecessary meddling that will harm consumers. William Brangham joins us now with more. William?
That's right, Jeff. We've all had this experience. You sign up for a subscription or an ongoing membership, but then when you're done with it, undoing that subscription is a complex, difficult, multi-step process. The FTC's new rule would require that getting out of those plans would be as easy as it was getting in. Erin Whitty is Director of Consumer Protection for the Consumer Federation of America and a supporter of this rule. Erin, thank you so much for being here. They call this new rule click to cancel. Can you just tell us in practicality, how would it roll out?
So the purpose of this rule is to really align the interests of consumers and businesses by making businesses rely on affirmative consumer choice rather than trapping them in a subscription. The click to cancel part of the rule simply says that if a consumer is in a subscription, it should be as easy to get out of the subscription as it was to get in. And by making it easier to cancel subscriptions, the Federal Trade Commission is making sure that consumers are able to get and keep the products that they really want and break up with the ones that they don't. It also gives businesses a very clear standard for what it means to have a simple cancellation process.
What is the rationale for this? I mean, I mentioned how it can be very complex and burdensome to do it, but what is the actual harm that is being addressed here?
Well, we've seen a number of complaints to federal and state government agencies. The Federal Trade Commission estimates that they receive about 70 complaints per day about illegal and deceptive subscription traps. We've also seen federal class actions that talk about this. And I think that what it really removes from the process is the affirmative consumer choice. So consumers end up paying for things that they might not want anymore. And that might just be a product of inertia. They may have forgotten about it, or they may have just relented because they weren't actually able to get out of that subscription because the company designed it to be that way. The company designed the subscription to be really difficult to cancel in order to trap somebody in it and keep billing them over and over and over for this product.
You mentioned that this is streamlining the process for businesses as well, but a lot of businesses, as you know, don't like this rule. They argue that it is just governmental meddling. Neil Bradley of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce was one of those critics. He said this: not only will this rule deter businesses from providing sensible, consumer-friendly subscriptions, but will leave Americans with fewer options, higher prices, and more headaches. I mean, as a proponent of this rule, what would you say to that critique?
Well, I'm not surprised to see critiques because businesses can make a lot of money off of consumers that just forget to cancel a subscription. They can really rely on this phenomenon called inertia. And a group of researchers from Stanford University actually studied this and said they looked at debit and credit card activity and evaluated when consumers had their card canceled, right? And they had to actually actively opt back into that subscription. They were about 4 times more likely to cancel and not continue that subscription. So when consumers are making affirmative choices, we can see that they don't want these subscriptions quite as often. And frankly, this rule doesn't make subscription practices illegal, it makes them fair. And it makes sure that consumers have the freedom to break up with a product that they no longer want instead of being trapped by a business's dark pattern or design that keeps billing them over and over for something that they might not really want.
I mean, as you know, we are in the middle of an election season, could be a brand new administration coming in. Is this the kind of thing that a potential Trump administration, as opposed to the Biden administration, could undo when they get into office?
Well, I won't be surprised at all to see a legal challenge to the rule, trying to strike it or render it ineffective. A new administration could certainly slow down that process, but this shouldn't be a partisan issue. We've seen Republicans support legislation that actually goes further than what the FTC's final rule did in making subscriptions easier to cancel. And frankly, a survey of voters said that many of those voters supported the FTC's efforts to rein in deceptive subscription practices, including 80% of the Republican voters that responded. So this should not be a partisan issue. Republicans should get on board and consider this a win because it's clear that consumers want and desperately need this very common sense change.
I mean, this is just one of several of what people would argue is an activist move by the FTC. How does this fit into the to the broader mission as elucidated by Chairman Lina Khan?
Well, I think Chair Khan is paying attention to what is really harming consumers and what consumers are really complaining about and where they are having money siphoned out of their pockets, not necessarily with their consent. And so I think this is a very common sense solution to an extremely pervasive problem that everyone can relate to. The chair has had a phenomenal record of responding to everyday problems that hurt the pocketbooks of Americans. And what she's trying to do is what she's done with her other consumer protection rulemakings, enforcement efforts, and public statements like policy statements and guidance, which is to give consumers freedom to make the choices that they want to engage with the product that they choose.
All right, Erin Whitty of the Consumer Federation of America, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
From John F. Kennedy's assassination to the Son of Sam murders, Jimmy Breslin famously covered the major events of the 20th century as a columnist for the New York Daily News. Whether working as a copy boy or later winning the Pulitzer Prize for commentary, Breslin's plain-spoken approach captured the country's attention, offering readers a poetic and blunt perspective on the issues that mattered most. Jimmy Breslin, The Man Who Told the Truth, is the first biography of the legendary writer and a revealing portrait of a complex newsman. I spoke recently to author Richard Esposito. Welcome to the NewsHour.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Jimmy Breslin had such a unique way of telling stories from the perspective of ordinary people. As some might remember, when he covered the funeral services of John F. Kennedy, he tracked down the man who dug JFK's grave and wrote a column about him. What influenced his approach?
Anybody can stand next to everybody else and tell that part of a story. And in fact, when he went down there, he said, I'm not standing with 10,000 people scribbling down notes and taking pictures. I'll find a story. So he went to Mr. Pollard's house and watched him eat his breakfast, put on his coveralls, and go to Arlington Cemetery to dig the grave. So what does that approach do? It puts you in a story. And now you're with someone you're capturing pain and loss through the eyes of the man who's digging the grave. And as you're reading it, you realize you're learning everything you need to know about Jackie O's pain, about the children without a father. And most importantly, he captures America's hope, essentially going into that hole. Yeah. That's his approach.
What drew you to him? Why write a biography of Jimmy Breslin?
You know, I got asked that question a few times. I felt a voice that big, his story needed to be told. For 50 years, he told stories about America. Selma, Alabama, he was there. The death of Martin Luther King, he was there. RFK, he traveled with him to California and was there as he got shot. When New York City was in the throes of violence, he wrote about young people getting killed for their coats. When Jimmy Carter promised to revive Charlotte Street in the South Bronx, which had been burnt down, he followed that story. I felt someone who stood for people for 50 years was worth telling the story, because he also stood for you and me, because we got to learn from that, how to tell stories, and that's why I did it.
His writing was equal parts profane and profound at times.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. What set him apart from his peers?
Plain English turned into poetry. Somebody described him once as like a cab driver who wrote like Yeats. So he had short and simple sentences that people could read on the subway. Back when people, turned the pages of newspapers, 1,000 word short story that when you got off the train, you felt something of beauty in it. And even when he told a story with pain, he remembered to give you a little humor in there. And that humor is something that you could walk out of the train and on your way to work and have a little smile as well. So that was his gift.
One of the most notable moments, and you capture this in the book, was when Jimmy Breslin received letters from the Son of Sam during those murders. How did he handle that morally and professionally?
Those are two of the best questions, because that was the mix of selling newspapers. They sold millions of copies, and Son of Sam, his boss, said, if we could have put the postage stamp in the paper to sell another 20, we would have put the postage stamp. And this is a guy who went to Cornell and was a gifted reporter himself. Jimmy normally had hours to write. With Son of Sam, he had days to think about that letter. And what he wrote to Son of Sam. He was responding to the letter. That was professional and profound. And then there was turn yourself into me. That was the buffoon and the comedian. And you read that and you go, this is why people say tabloids are bad. What he was saying was, this is why tabloids are good. We're telling stories to working people. So he was a mix, the professional, the profane, and sometimes the buffoon. He was larger than life. Someone once said, Jimmy Breslin was in a movie, produced by Jimmy Breslin, starring Jimmy Breslin, and the rest of us were just characters in the movie. That's how he viewed the world, you know?
What do you think he'd make of today's media landscape and the ways in which journalism is practiced today?
You know, that's a question you and I probably ask ourselves every day. What do we make of this landscape? There were two parts to that. He felt when the internet started, he called me one day and he said, this is a gale coming and I'm going with it and the rest of you guys are stuck here. He saw that he could write for this new medium. What he made of it was its distribution and how do you get your stories out. I think what he'd make of it now is we're in a lot of silos right now and we're all sort of reading what we already believe. A little tricky that, you know? And I'm hoping some voices emerge, and I think they will, that transcend the silos so we all have some common things to talk about. Whether we agree with each other or not, it's not the point. It's that we could disagree about something we've all learned. So I think he'd do fine. How someone who grew up in his era would do in a newsroom, you know, the mores of newsrooms have changed. And people don't go around screaming, yelling at the top of their lungs and drinking and smoking. So I often wonder, would he have changed and fit in with the newsroom too?
I doubt it.
Probably not, right? You've read the book, so.
Yeah, that's right.
You know.
That's right. The book is Jimmy Breslin, The Man Who Told the Truth by Richard Esposito with reporting by Ted Gerstein. Great to speak with you. Thanks so much.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Detroit has been in the headlines during this campaign season, with former President Donald Trump recently comparing the city to a developing nation. But Detroit is increasingly known for its creativity, and one couple is using the arts to turn around an entire neighborhood. Special correspondent Megan Thompson visited Little Village to see its big plans. It's part of our arts and culture series, Canvas.
We have McClellan and Kercheval, famous intersection. There was a bank right here.
Dolores Orr has lived for more than 70 years in the East Village neighborhood of Detroit.
We had the drugstore on the corner, then right here, the bakery, Bluebird Bakery. They baked all the best bread in the world. I can't even tell you how much of a change I've seen. I've seen it rise and I've seen it fall.
So Orr, who helps lead the local neighborhood association, was thrilled when she was approached about a big idea, the creation of a new arts district here called Little Village. It would start with converting an empty church into an art gallery.
I was excited that it's going to be up and running again, and it's something new to me because I haven't visited a lot of art galleries.
We wanted to include exhibitions, projects, performance.
Anthony Curis, a real estate developer, first became a gallery owner in 2012 when he co-founded the Library Street Collective with his wife, JJ, a downtown Detroit art gallery with a mission of supporting social causes, local artists, and the revival of the city center.
Our programming has always had a major focus on creating change, trying to impact the community in different ways.
For their next big project, the Curises wanted to impact a neighborhood. After meeting with East Village leaders like Dolores Orr, they bought the 113-year-old Good Shepherd Church and 3 more buildings on the lot and launched the new cultural space earlier this year.
It was really important for us to try to keep as much of the church intact as we could.
Now called The Shepherd, it's a meeting place, performance space, and art gallery all in one. There's an emphasis on local artists, and in particular artists of color, reflecting the community that surrounds it.
Intention is huge for us. We want this to feel like a place you can come and feel, not only welcome, but you feel like you have a connection to the work that's here.
So this book is called Art in the Stations, The Detroit People Mover.
Visitors will find more than just paintings and sculpture. There's a small library by the old confessionals, curated by arts educator Ozma Walton, the founder of a traveling collection of books called Black Art Library. For this collection, Walton chose books on a wide range of topics.
Artists of early Michigan, Detroit graffiti. This book is called The Ultimate Art Museum, so I really wanted the space to feel like you can find something if you're interested in art, no matter what that actually means.
This exploration of art continues outside, where giant sculptures designed by the late Detroit artist Charles McGee are meant to be played on. And there's a skate park created by artist MacArthur Binion and the renowned skateboarder Tony Hawk.
You know, you might be skating on that park and not even know that it's really a sculpture. The idea was to really turn this idea of public sculpture being this very exclusive thing that's meant to not be touched. We really wanted this to be accessible.
When other arts groups saw this transformation, they wanted to be in the neighborhood too. So Curis bought that old Bluebird Bakery building down the street and opened a new space earlier this year called Lantern. It's now home to two nonprofits, one preserving traditional letterpress printing, the other for artists with developmental disabilities. Upstairs, there are artist studios.
Most of these are referenced from bouquets.
Paul Verdell was living in Toledo, Ohio, when Anthony Curis offered to represent him at his downtown Detroit gallery.
He sold me on Detroit. I was trying to figure out a city to be my next move.
Since moving here 3 years ago, Verdell has pivoted from figurative drawings to more abstract work. He says the affordable rent and gallery support gave him the freedom to do it.
I can really just think about my creativity.
Verdell also lives close by. The Curises have rehabbed more than 20 residential properties in the area and rent them at below market rates, several to artists like Verdell, who says he's seen a big change in the neighborhood since moving in.
People, there's a lot of people.
And there will likely be even more. The Shepherd's Old Rectory is now an art-filled bed and breakfast. Coming soon nearby, a cocktail bar, pastry shop, and more art spaces and galleries. And the Curises are transforming a large property on the Detroit River into Stanton Yards, a waterfront park, offices, and restaurant to open in 2027. In total, more than 16 acres of green space and 17 cultural and commercial buildings across 10 city blocks.
If you build it, they will come.
Rochelle Riley is the Director of Arts and Culture for the City of Detroit. She says Little Village is one of the largest projects of its kind the city has seen in recent years.
We are on a mission to revitalize the city using arts as catalysts. I want people from around the country to come and see, oh, look at what they did in Detroit. We should do something like that here. But more than that, I want people here to say, oh, look what we've got here, and enjoy it.
But we have so many people in the building here, 99% African Americans.
Dolores Orr says the Curises have made it clear everyone is welcome to enjoy the new modern art spaces, but she believes some of the longtime lower-income residents are hesitant.
To me, the art is for, I wouldn't say the people in the neighborhood, because they don't think that it's for them. If it were myself and I didn't know Anthony, how would I feel coming over here to see what's going on? I don't know if I would, because I'm not in the same class, I would say.
Orr wants to help change that mindset because she believes projects like this are making the East Village rise again.
It's as if East Village has been forgotten, and then you have Anthony and other developers that came in and said, hey, we haven't forgot. We're here to help.
That one right there is my favorite statue.
The neighborhood kids have not hesitated to come explore. 9-year-old Aiden Curtis and his 5-year-old sister Demia live in that building next door. Aiden says he likes to come over here to play and enjoy the art.
Had you ever seen art like this before?
No, never in my life, but now I do. I say it's beautiful. Beautiful.
When Aiden looks up at these giant sculptures, he imagines butterflies.
It's basically like when you have a butterfly and you just letting it go like this. That's one thing I love about nature, butterflies. It just brings me joy. That's what it does, brings me joy.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Megan Thompson in Detroit.
It's a great story. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS NewsHour, thanks for spending part of your evening with us.
This NewsHour has been provided by
Consumer Cellular. This is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial.
Well, somebody's pocket.
Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular,
You get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing.
have a nice day.
It really matters when you have an opportunity to give back.
Being part of something that's bigger than myself, that's what brings me happiness.
Being able to integrate your professional career with some of these other things that are important to you, it's critical to be happy at the end of the day.
You know, this is our community too, and we want to participate and give back to it.
People want those opportunities to make an impact and a difference.
Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.